Good evening. Hope you're joining us tonight. Chapter 9 of the Original Adventures of Hank the Cowdog by John R. Erickson. Wonderful book. Hope you all buy it after you've been kind of introduced to the series by these videos. Wonderful to read to your children, wonderful to read to yourself and just your family. Great for car rides and all that stuff. Well, Hank has been accepted into the Coyote tribe, and now, Chapter 9, Me Just a Worthless Coyote. That business about the secret was a perfect stroke, and it probably saved my life. In desperation, I had lucked into it. Turns out the coyotes are superstitious animals, even though they're known to be cunning and vigilant. Vigilant. You know, I've never been able to spell that word. V-I-J-J-U-L. I don't know how to spell that word. Now, spelling is a pain in the neck. I do my best with it, but I figure if a guy has a tremendous gift as a writer, then the audience will forgive his few slip-ups in the spelling department. I mean, it doesn't take any brains to open a dictionary and look up a word. Anybody can do that. The real test of a writer comes in the creative process. I try to attend to the big picture, don't you see, and let the spelling just kind of take care of itself. V-I-D-G-A-L-E, no, V-I-D-G-U-L-L-U-N-T. That just doesn't sound right. Anyway, coyotes are suspicious brutes, and that deal about the secret caught them all completely off guard. Now, actually, it turned out better than I ever thought it was. It made me a kind of celebrity in the tribe, and I was treated like a visiting dignitary. Well, dignitary. You know what I mean. Treated like a dignitary by everyone but Scraunch. Scraunch, he continued to give me hateful glances, mutter under his breath every time our paths crossed. And I couldn't blame him for being sore. I mean, I had won, he had lost. And you can't expect everyone to be a good loser. Now, as we say in the security business, show me a good loser, and I'll show you a loser. Scraunch had lost big time, and he had lost a big one. I was confident that he would hate my guts forever, even though there was a good chance that I would eventually become his brother-in-law. You know, when Missy had first mentioned that possibility at the time, I was still thinking of going back home, back to Drover and Pete, the chickens, the sewer, the cowboys, my old job. But a couple of days in the coyote village, well, they pretty much convinced me I had found my place in the world, my true place in the world as a savage. Now, the life of a savage ain't too bad. I admit that I was raised with a natural prejudice. I was raised with a natural bias against coyotes. Ma always told me that they were just lazy, sneaky, undisciplined, didn't have any ambition, but what chapped her most about coyotes was that they ate rotten meat that made them smell bad. True, every single word of that. But what she didn't tell me was that laziness and riotous living can be a lot of fun. Now, I don't blame her for not telling us that. I mean, she was trying her best to raise a litter of registered, papered, blue ribbon, top-of-the-line cow dogs, and there's no better way to mess up a good cow dog than to let them discover that goofing off beats hard work any day of the week. Now, I discovered it by accident. And once I had a taste of indolence, well, I just loved it. I mean, all at once I had no responsibilities, no cares, no worries. When I woke up in the morning, I didn't have to wonder if my ranch had made it through the night, or if I would get yelled at again for something that I hadn't done. After about a week after I joined the tribe, I made a couple of good friends with two brothers, Rip and Snort. They were what you'd call typical coyote good old boys. Filthy, smelled awful, not real smart, loved to fight and have a good time with no more ambition than a fence post. If Rip and Snort took a shine to you, you had two of the best friends in the whole wide world. If they didn't happen to like your looks or your attitude, you were in a world of trouble. Fortunately, I got along with them and they got along with me. One evening, towards sunset, they came around and asked me if I wanted to go carousing. I was feeling refreshed. Since I'd slept a good part of the day, got up, around noon, and I ate a piece of rabbit that Missy had caught. Then I went back to bed. I was all rested up and said, sure, I'd love to go carousing. So off we went, me and Rip and Snort, on a big adventure. We went down the canyon, crossed over the big sandy draw, and it cuts through there. Then we went across some rolling country until we came to an old silage pit. I'd been by it many times, but I'd never taken really time to get into the pit and check things out. By the time I took over the ranch, the cowboys had quit feeding silage, so I didn't know much about it or what to do with it. Well, one of the things I didn't know about silage was that it's fermented, which means that it's got some alcohol in it. Which means if a guy eats enough of it, his attitude about the world will begin to change. All those years I'd spent on the ranch, and I never knew any of that. But Rip and Snort knew all about that silage. Yes, they did. And they made a well-packed trail in and out of the silage pit. So we started eating silage. Struck me as kind of bitter at first. But the more I ate, the less I noticed the bitterness. By George, after about an hour of that, I thought it was as sweet as honey. Well, we ate and we laughed. And then we laughed and we ate. And when it came time to leave, Rip and Snort had to pull me out of that place, fellers, because I couldn't get enough of that fine stuff. A big moon was out, and we went single file down a cow path. Snort in the lead, me in the middle, Rip in the caboose. Funny thing, that cow path kept wiggling around. I had a devil of a time trying to stay on it. I asked Rip about it, and he said he was having the same trouble. Darned path kept going from one side to the other. I suspect the silage had something to do with that. That's what I suspect. Well, next thing I knew, Rip had stopped a rise and came to a sudden halt, which caused a little pile-up with me running into Snort and Rip running into me, just because I couldn't any of us see real well at that point. "Stop here," said Snort. "Sing many songs, sing pretty songs, sing loud. Teach Hunk coyote song." So we sat down on our haunches, throwed our heads back, and started singing. Oh, maybe you know this tune, but we put some different words to it. Let's see if I can remember how that song went. Me just a worthless coyote, me howling at the moon, Me not one job or duties, no church or Sunday school. Me just a worthless coyote. Well, I don't really know how the rest of it went. I only know the last part rhymed with school. It was either pool or drool or something like that. And anyway, it was a crackerjack of a song. We ripped through it a couple of times until I had her down. Then we divided up. Snort took the bass. Rip carried the melody, and I got up on the high tenor part. Oh, don't know if I've ever heard better singing. It was one of them priceless moments in life when three very gifted guys come together and blend their talents and sort of raise the cultural standards of the whole dang world. I mean, it was good. We sang it 4 or 5 times, then all at once Snort's ears perked up, and he lifted his paw to get us to stop. We stopped and listened. Off in the distance we heard yapping. There was something familiar about that yap, but for a minute I couldn't place it. Then it occurred to me that we were sitting on a spot just a 1/4 mile north of ranch headquarters. That yapping was coming from Drover. I think Rip and Snort had a notion to amble down there and see if they could get into a fight. I had to explain to them that they couldn't run fast enough to get Drover into a fight, that it would be a waste of their time. Let me go down there and talk to him, I said. He's an old buddy of mine. We used to work together. Maybe he'll come back and sing with us. We could use another guy on baritone. They shrugged. Snort sat down and started scratching his ear. More fun fight, but singing okay too. We wait. So I trotted down to the ranch, weaving a little bit from side to side and humming, Me just a worthless coyote. Man, that was a good song. When I was 25 yards away, I slowed down to a walk. I could see Drover off ahead of me. He was peering off in the distance. The little dope hadn't seen me coming. But I decided to stop and watch him for a minute. He was all bunched up and tense. Off in the distance, he could hear Rip and Snort laughing and belching and having a good old time. He'd cock his head and listen for a minute. Then he'd give it that old yip, 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 yip. Every yip, all 4 feet came off the ground. He'd stop and listen again. He never saw me. He never had the slightest notion that I was sitting 10 yards away from him watching the whole show. This was my replacement. I understand the guy had taken over my job as ranch security. I didn't need anyone to tell me that the ranch had completely gone to pot. Goodness. I cleared my throat. Drover froze. What was that? Who's there? What's going on, son? He gave me his usual squeak, and in a flash he was highballing it for the machine shed, squalling like a turpentined cat. He'd gone maybe 10, 12 yards, and he slowed to a walk and then stopped. Hank, is that you? Uh-huh. It is? Uh-huh. How can I be sure? I thought you'd left the country. Well, why don't you just trot your little self over here and see? He came real close and real slow, a few steps at a time. It sure sounds like you. Son of a gun. You're not fooling me, are you, Hank? Get over here and quit messing around. Okay. I want to be sure, that's all. He came creeping up on me. "Hank!" Boo! He screamed and jumped straight up in the air. "Hank, stop! Don't do that! My nerves!" "Drover, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. What a pitiful excuse you are for a night watchman. I could have carried off half the chicken house. You never would have gotten the news." He hung his head low. "I know. I'm a failure. Every morning I wake up and say, 'Here's another day for me to mess up, Drover.' And I do every single time. It hasn't been the same since you left, Hank." I knew it wouldn't. I tried to tell them, but they wouldn't listen. I mean, you can't treat a good dog like a dog and expect to keep him. "Gosh, I wish you'd come back." I laughed. "You can forget that, son, 'cause it'll never happen. I've found a better life." He looked me over real careful. "What's come over you, Hank? You look different. You smell different. You stink." "I've joined the cowboy tribe." I heard him gasp. "No!" "That's right. And if you had a brain in your head, you'd come along and join up too. It ain't a bad life, let me tell you." He took a couple of steps back. "I can't believe it. What would your mother say?" "She'd say I was a turncoat and a traitor. So what? I tried the straight life. I did my job, and what did I get? Abuse, ingratitude. No, thank you. Life's too short for that. I'll cast my lot with the outlaws of the world." "3 weeks ago," he said in a quavery voice, "you were on the side of law and order, trying to catch the murderers. Now you're one of them." "That's right." He started crying. "Oh, Hank, I can't take this. I used to admire you so much. You were my hero. I thought you were the greatest dog in the world. Since I was a pup, I wanted to be just like you, brave and strong and fearless." "Knock it off, Drover. I don't want to hear that stuff." "And dedicated to duty. I could never be as good as you, but I wanted to try. You were my idol, Hank." "Cut it out, will you?" "Come back home, Hanky. I need you. The ranch needs you. We all need you." That kind of struck me in the heart, hearing Drover say those things. Then Rip and Snort called for me. "Hunk, come sing. We tired wait." "Who's that?" "One of my pals. Come up a hill with me, Drover. I'll show you a good time. Introduce you to my friends." "Are they drunk like you?" There was a little edge to his voice. He'd never talked to me like that before. "Well, maybe they are and maybe they aren't. Who cares?" "Well, la-ti-da, aren't we high and mighty tonight?" Drover dried his eyes with the back of his paw. "I better get back to the ranch. I'm on guard duty tonight." I laughed in his face. "You're on guard? Son, you're a sorry excuse for a guard dog running to the machine shed every time you hear a sound." "I'm not running anymore, Hank. Somebody's got to protect the ranch. We can't depend on you anymore." "You'll run. You always have. You always will." "I ain't gonna run." "Sure you will. I can prove it." Boo! He didn't run. "That don't prove a thing. When the time comes, when the chips are down, you'll run and hide." He looked me in the eye. "No, I won't, Hank. And if you come with them, I won't run from you either. You..." Then he turned and started walking away. "You always were a little chump." He stopped and said, "I may be a jump, Hank, but I'm not a traitor. Goodbye. Go on, you little dummy. Who needs you anyway, you sawdust, stub-tailed, self-righteous little pup squeak? Rover went on his way, and I went mine. On my way up the hill, I could hear the boys singing me just a worthless cow again. I took my place between Rip and Snort and belted out the high tenor note. We went on like that all night long, singing and laughing and chasing mice. But it wasn't quite as much fun this time. And so ends chapter 9. Tomorrow night, chapter 10, Aged Mutton. Hope you can join me. This is a great weekend today, Good Friday. We celebrate and think about the crucifixion of our Lord, and Sunday we will be celebrate Resurrection Day. And it's a busy weekend for all. Remember, if you can't join me live, then you can always pick it up later on the Facebook page. And remember, I'll have chapters 1 through 9 all loaded up on YouTube. That would be Rick Stovall, Hank the Cowdog. You can see all 9 chapters on YouTube after I get this one loaded up, which is always a challenge for someone that's, 95 years old like me. So I hope you have a great weekend. And again, thank you guys, all of you in the medical field working so hard, all of you in the food industry, whether it's the servers and the restaurant owners and everyone at the grocery store doing so much for people like us who sometimes just get impatient. We thank you for working so hard. Everyone, be safe. Love one another, and I hope you are able to worship with people, even if it's just a virtual worship this weekend and can't remember Passover. And we thank you for joining us tonight. Love you guys. You be careful. Bye-bye.